Good stuff is good any weekday, and this topic and this opportunity is good. It'd be good any weekday.
I love
Awesome. Well, we are now officially live, so I get to do my little kickoff over again. So thanks everybody for joining us this Wednesday for Fintech Fridays Live. It's kind of confusing, I know. Before I hit the go live button, I talked to this group here, my friends on the panel, and said that I apologize for confusing folks thinking it's Friday, but it's not. Christy, PB, Sue, thank you guys so much for joining me on this special edition of Fintech Fridays Live, and for spending some time with me. We don't get to see each other as often as we used to when we were all traveling like crazy. So it's great to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit of work and also have fun with some smart people in the industry.
Right on. So the topic for our conversation, and it will be a conversation, and just forewarning the audience, it could go in a bunch of different directions with this group here, just so you know. The topic is really around achieving positive ROI on tech investments. My panelists collaborated on a paper that was sponsored by the Certified Mortgage Banker Society, specifically the tech committee within the CMB Society. And that paper published a few months back, I believe. We will put a link to the paper in the comments here, so you'll see those. Feel free to download it and enjoy. But before we go into the topic, let me, for those that aren't aware, introduce my esteemed guests. We've got Christy Suk, my former colleague and teammate in our former lives, and now a mortgage executive with Texas Capital Bank. Christy is she's at the forefront of housing affordability and innovation, serves on the board at Train.ai as well as Voxter, and is just an all-around great person. Thanks, Christy, for coming on today. We have Sue Woodard. Sue is a dear friend of the industry and has been at it for a while, as a few of us have been in this industry. Today serves as a senior advisor at Stratmore. We know her as kind of the evangelist at large, kind of one of our industry's best cheerleaders. And Sue, I love having you on here today as well.
Thanks, Brian.
And finally, my current colleague and dear friend, PB, and PB froze, so we're gonna have to let him back in here. PB and I are teammates here at FinLocker, and PB's one of the best thinkers in our industry, and is frankly one of the best executors in the industry as well. And what a panel, powerhouse panel here. So our topic is really centered on the paper that you guys published, again, sponsored by the CMB Society and specifically the Tech Committee. I want to ask the first question: what made you write the paper, and why is positive return on investment important in this context, especially today? And I'll let whoever wants to start off go for it.
PB, if you're talking, we can't hear you, but I'll jump in because I think this is hugely important as a lender who has implemented a lot of tech over my entire career. And some of that tech in the beginning wasn't as exciting and did a lot of the things that the tech today does. But we're at a place in the industry where it's very expensive to originate a loan. And while in the past we had those extra cushions, extra basis points where we could implement tech and take a risk on it, the return didn't have to be as good or as well documented as it does today. Today, we have very limited dollars to invest, and everything that we do needs to create efficiencies in our operations, in the way we manufacture the loan, and it's got to actually create a positive return on investment. Times we need that We need it as an industry, and it's something that we should be asking of our tech providers, but it's also something we have to ask of ourselves so that we ensure we're getting what we think we're getting and that we're actually delivering to our teams and creating the right environment for them.
I'll piggyback on top of that and say that having been both on the lender side and for the last couple of decades on the technology side, I have seen implementations of technology and adoption and ROI be really successful and sometimes be really unsuccessful with the exact same product. And there's similarities between when you see something and it just does not go well and ROI is not being achieved, and just the adoption's not on. There's similarities there in what that path looked like. And when it goes really well and adoption is great and ROI is achieved, there's similarities there too. And I think that's what we're hoping to unpack, because it's painful on the lender side and it's painful on the vendor side when there's that disconnect.
We keep losing PB, so I'll bring him back in.
Man of mystery, you can't pin him down.
I know, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes. We got you, PB.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, some glitchy about my audio video, but anyway, I apologize. So you asked really good question, Christy and Sue. Thanks for bailing me out. Why did we choose to write the paper, and why is it important? In your intro, Brian, you kind of mentioned the CMB Society, and CMB Society is one of our premier designations we have in the industry to kind of go through the process and become a certified mortgage banking professional. And the society does a lot of activity for supporting the members of the CMB Society. And one of the committees that the CMB Society has is the CMB Tech Committee, where Christy and I sit on. And we try to do outreach work for supporting our society members with the topics of relevance in technology space. Our industry, as much as is about providing people homes made of brick and mortar, the path to get there and path to stay there and the path to do what you need to do in building wealth through homeownership is all data and technology driven these days. And the tech committee does produce relevant tech topic content, whether it's webinars, white papers like the one we produced today, to kind of meet the need that our society has on trying to understand what's going on with tech and how to apply tech, that kind of good stuff. And Sue probably touched on, my audio was glitchy, so I couldn't tell, but Sue probably touched on the importance of tech and ROI. The origination costs are through the roof. They're the highest they have been. Now, it's not the same origination process we do today that was done 15 years ago. There's a lot more, lot better consumer experience, a lot more reg and compliance and safety stuff that we have to do and pay for. So the cost kind of keeps growing, and in an environment where the volumes of yesterday have gone, and there is a lot of margin compression for a lot of our lenders, and a number of them are CMB society members as well. We thought we'd write a paper, and we wrote a series actually. There is 3 or 4 of them where we talked about different aspects. What can you think about? How do you bring in technology for QC, and how do you think about technology for automation? And what Sue, I, and Christy collaborated on is a wraparound paper that talks about how do you think about return on investment? What are some of the reasons you cannot achieve the right ROI? What are some of the tricks of trade you can do to do a better ROI? So hopefully that gives you a little bit more context on why CMB Tech Society picked this topic and why ROI is important at this time. Again, I apologize for the audio video glitch there. Hopefully at least voice is coming through. I'll fix the camera thing in just a bit.
All good. Appreciate that. Great. I'm a big supporter of the CMB Society. I've been a member since 2005, so quite a while, and I love what the society is doing, not just for its those that wear the pin, but for the industry as a whole. And the fact that they brought you 3 together is pretty cool as well. Let's stay on the ROI topic for a moment and just kind of poke a little bit at it, because I think there's a couple things that I think about when I think about mortgage technology. There's a couple buckets of technology. There's the must haves, right? The essential technology that lenders and originators of all sizes have to run their business, right? So those are just kind of non-negotiables. You have to have a loan origination system. You have to have some technology to support disclosures and closings and all those types of things that are in the loan manufacturing process. So let's just take that as a separate bucket, because I think there's a different lens that needs to go on that set of technology versus some of the other tech. As lenders are thinking about, their point of sale, loan origination system, disclosure technology, pricing engine, things that are in that kind of manufacturing process, what are some things lenders should be discussing early on with their vendor partners when they're contemplating, either bringing a new tech in or replacing, some tech on that?
I think one of the things you really have to think about when you're looking at any tech, and this should be not only tech you're bringing in, but the tech you already have. What does it do? What is it supposed to do, and how is it supposed to work? I think a lot of times we approach a technology and we say, oh, I need something that does this solution. And we only implement that one tiny piece and we don't implement the rest of it. And then we don't understand why the ROI isn't what the vendor stated.
Yeah.
But we, for lack of a better word, have bastardized the system. We also haven't looked at how we drive adoption and change management, because tech isn't magic. It's not a silver bullet. It doesn't just appear and make everything better. You have to really think about your processes and your workflows and how it all works together and what experience you're providing to the customer. We can't forget that everything that we're doing is about the customer. And that customer is both your external customer and your internal customer. We can't do something that makes it better for the consumer, but forgets that we have this internal customer and now we've made it 10 times harder for them, or vice versa. So there's this balance that says, what's the important thing? Why are you implementing this? And how are you going to ensure you get what you need out of it? I mean, that was really this impetus and this great conversation I thought that PB and Sue and I had as we were working through this paper, and what points did we want to bring out? Because this wraps around, Brian, to your point, any type of technology required, whatever place in the system or process that it goes. But if you don't have a plan for what you're doing or why you're doing it, you're never going to get to where you want to go.
Yeah.
Love that.
Well said. In our paper, Brian, we talk about the 3 Ps. One is the purpose, one is the position, and one is the people aspect of tech. Christy touched on all 3 of them, more articulately than I could, but I'm going to take another pass at it because it's an important part of answering this puzzle. Purpose, why are you bringing it in? And what problem are you trying to solve is extremely important. And Christy mentioned that, I think, in her response. It's a fairly complicated thing to establish purpose. You need to kind of have a decent amount of investment in a baseline. What is it looking? What does my business look today? And I'm going to bring something else in to do something for me, a purpose, whatever that purpose is. Improve my customer acquisition pull-through rate, lower my cost of manufacturing, or improve my QC in a cycle time. So whatever that purpose is, what's your baseline? Are you trying to solve for the right purpose on bringing in the tech? 2 is position. What are you positioning this tech to do? And where are you positioning your tech in your manufacturing life cycle? It's a great thing that our industry tends to be a collection of technology and tools, because best of breed is a path. You get the best point of sale and the best LOS and the best QC system and the best audit system, all those kinds of things. You put all those things together because each of them probably are very good in what they do. But then with that comes fragmentation, with that comes friction. So position is important. What are you positioning this tech to be, and what's to the left of that tech and what's to the right of that tech in your supply chain? How does it impact your operations? How does it impact your tech stack integration, that kind of good stuff? And 3 is people. And it's I'm in a tech vendor job, and I will tell you, it is super easy to implement any new tech. That is not always the case. You really have to be thoughtful about change management. How are you investing in your customers being ready to receive your tech? How are you investing in your own teams, operations and technology in adapting to the tech? So because these are pretty common reasons for failure across what we see. The purpose is not always understood or researched, or there is no analytical base for measuring whether or not it's meeting the purpose. The positioning, we position a spot solution and then expect it to magically flow, and it doesn't. And then we underinvest in change management. We brought in a new tech, and we have a brochure that the vendor says everything is going to be great, but it doesn't necessarily work that way unless you invest in the change management side. So those are three big ones that we kind of put out there in the paper, and I think they've been substantiated over like decades of our observation and our own experiences. Some of these mistakes we made ourselves, at least I made myself, and learned it the hard way.
There's a ton to unpack there in what you just said. I feel like, okay, that's our outline for like everything else we want to talk about. But, you made me think about a term that I heard. It was on a Stratmore workshop where somebody described their tech stack as Frankenstack, because they said we have pasted together all these things, but we didn't clearly know the purpose of each one. Are they going to talk to each other? And so I think the other compelling reason really behind a lot of this, Brian, is, hearing these stories from lenders where they're like, I bought all the stuff and it doesn't all do the things that I, wanted it to do or thought that it would do. And so I think, I'll go one click deeper on something PB just said, which is really about having realistic expectations. And being clear, be clear about that purpose, but then being realistic about it. And you have to really be thoughtful too. A lot of times people will say, well, it's just like, this technology isn't working because my volume's down. And it's
right.
like, volume is down regardless of any kind of technology you have, putting the shoe on the other foot. You could also say that any technology that anyone happened to purchase at the beginning of 2020 must have been the most magical and amazing technology in the world, because look at what volume did. So you have to be realistic, right, in how you're going to measure against what does success actually look like. And sometimes people get too tied up with it being all about driving. It's got to be about units, or am I profitable as a business? I do love alliteration. I'm going to throw one more set of alliteration in there. When I think about different ways to measure ROI, I have 4 P's actually. So this piles onto the 3 P's, but the 4, one is profitability. Of course, people want to be, have their businesses be profitable, but is that your metric? Is it profitability? And if so, you better have a darn good baseline of where you started so that you can make a good difference. And you need to be able to, kind of filter out the market moves in the background as well. Second is productivity. In many cases, people are bringing a technology in so that they can do more volume, more loans, or higher quality with a lower head count because the technology is helping support that. The third would be people. Sometimes there is a technology that is purely around improving customer satisfaction, customer experience, even employee satisfaction or employee experience. That is not to be overlooked. And finally, the fourth one is prevention, which is risk avoidance. There's not a good financial line item there, but that doesn't mean that the technologies that help you prevent risk, don't have an ROI, but you have to be very thoughtful about your ROI. And it's not always about, hey, it didn't add more dollars to my bottom line immediately. That is not the only measure of success.
I'm so glad that you weighed in with that piece, because that was going to be my next question. Because I think too often we, especially when we're we're running a line of business, we've got to report up to either executive management or a board of directors. Too often we fixate on the output of ROI as a dollar, right? As a true measure of ROI in the investment case. I actually think with certain technologies, and probably with a lot of technologies, it's a combination of those 4 Ps that really go into that equation. And Sue, I'm going to come back to you on this. And I know at Stratmore, you guys spend a lot of time on these types of business challenges and working with your clients on this. How is Stratmore and how are you guys helping lenders as they evaluate new processes, new technology, bring in all those components, not just the dollars, because that's the easy part, frankly, but how do you bring in those other areas when you're doing an ROI assessment? And then even before that, when a lender is working with the vendor early on, how should they be thinking about setting expectations across those multiple dimensions of the return, not just the dollars. Am I missing something? Is there a secret sauce there?
No, there's no, but again, there's a lot to unpack, and I'd invite Christy and Phoebe, please jump into this as well. But I think, there certainly is, there is a financial component to it always, because you're making an investment into this technology, right? And this is also where adoption, comes heartily into play, which has been another point that we made in this particular paper, because you can invest in a technology, but if you don't have the adoption, you're not going to get the results that you expected to have. And so I think both Christy and PB touched on a little bit change management. And so some of the key things, headlines, I would tell you that, in terms of what we look at Stratmore is, number one, it's matching up, kind of forcing that lender to be very clear about what their needs are. What are their existing technologies? What are their expectations? What are their must-haves? What are their must-not-haves? What are their things that are negotiable? We often find that a lender will approach a technology and they want to kind of, did you say bastardize earlier, Christy? I think you did. So I think I did. They want to almost bastardize the technology to make it do what, this workflow exactly like this, instead of listening to the vendor and saying, hey, we work with hundreds of different lenders. Here's what we found. There's actually a little different way you can do it, and it actually improves your workflow. And too often there's this unwillingness to listen to best practices, evaluate a different way to do something, and saying, I have to make this technology fit into this way that I'm doing it, even if it's not necessarily the best way to do it. So it's knowing that why, and understanding, kind of their purpose behind it, as PB said. It's talking about integrations is another big piece of it, is really being honest about the cost of those integrations. How is that data going to flow? Having somebody take charge and, make some of those tough decisions. It's getting the internal stakeholders before, during, and after. And depending on which group this is going to impact, it's getting some key constituents from that group, the stakeholders. If it's impacting production and it's very different to roll out something to, loan officers than it is to your operations team. Commission versus salary. It's a little different ballgame, as I think we all know. And so it's ensuring that you have the right stakeholders in place and are thinking about the change management, the engagement plan, the adoption plan. And I think the biggest thing, I will tell you, the biggest thing that we've seen at Stratmore in terms of the success of a technology coming in and being successful and getting the ROI that was expected and being considered a success versus not, has been 100% of the time, it is the engagement of leadership. It is leadership, the executive team, all the way up to the CEO, being aware, being informed, and being active and engaged in that process as that technology is rolling out, and not creating something where it's someone deep within the org that's trying to champion this thing and loan officers are doing the end around. And, it is having that executive commitment and leadership backing up this technology decision is the game changer.
Yeah, I love that.
I love what you said. And if I step back and go to the 50,000-foot view of what you've said, what Brian said, what PB has said, when we think about this, it's all about strategy and engagement. It is, do we know what we're trying to do? Do we have the right stakeholders, people involved at every level? And have we thought about it end to end? And then do we execute against that, right? I mean, everything that we're talking about revolves around really having that strategy outlined and sticking to it.
Yeah, I think when I think about kind of thinking back in my past, when I was on the lender side, and seemingly there was always a big project going on that you're kind of managing through. When I think of those that we could kind of give a thumbs up and say we're successful. The consistency, the common thing was always transparency and communication, right? And that started with the lender vendor relationship and making sure that both parties were very transparent on the resources that they were going to bring to the table. And then going down a layer and making sure that those resources that were ultimately going to be pulling together to make things happen understood their roles and the expectations for them. Yeah. And the flip side of where I saw plenty of projects go sideways were when those things weren't there, when you didn't have you had poor communication and no transparency around the process. And oftentimes, and I think it was Sue, you may have said this, you had kind of an end around, so to speak, where somebody saw a shiny object and wanted to bring this in because they thought it was going to be cool and it was going to save the world, but didn't really, manage it from a project perspective, was not transparent, did not communicate well. And then lo and behold, you had a big failure there. So I think, to me, as an operator, I would kind of lean on communication and transparency between the parties, the vendor and the lender in this instance, and then by extension, those in each respective shop that are going to be executing on the plan.
Yeah, 100% agree. As a technologist, I will say this: I don't think technology itself can be an answer to technology getting ROI. And here's what I mean by that: there is accountability on part of tech itself, not just the value of having a consistent strategy, the value of having the right kind of change management, engagement, and transparency. I think those are imperative, just as imperative as it is for tech itself to be done right. There is no excuse for closed-ended tech systems anymore. If we are going to be playing in an industry that does use best of breed kind of models, we want the best POS and the best LOS and the best something and best something else, then we should look to require the tech itself to be more open, more integrated, more interoperable, right? Under the guise of trying to, let's do an MVP and let's not boil the ocean, let's just go build 8 screens and show something to the consumer without absolutely thinking about what those 8 screens can do in terms of data flow from a consumer experience to a loan processor. It's not a good MVP, actually. It's not. So I think there is a big portion of tech itself taking the accountability for being relevant in realizing the ROI, to go along with the senior management engagement and support. Architectures have to be open and extensible. And good news is they are there. I mean, there is such pervasive adoption of the next gen architectures in our industry now. We see APIs and microservices being a thing. They're not a special offering to only select clients with large implementations. They are now available for everybody. I see a lot of fintechs coming into the market with that as the table stakes offering. We have APIs, we integrate well, we have open, and we got to put a plug-in for our friends over at Mismo, doing a really yeoman's job in trying to make sure there are standards of how data is represented. You call a spade through the value chain. Right? A condo is a condo and doesn't have 8 different interpretations of or expressions of that word. That standardization is important. So I think we do look at, and we have to ask ourselves and demand more of our tech providers on tech, that it is extensible, that it is interoperable, that they do subscribe and believe in some kind of data standards. I think tech itself can take some accountability and be a big part of this ROI conversation here.
Yeah, I love that. So I put out there for folks, for our audience, if they have questions that they'd like us to go deep on, to drop those in. So we'll make this as interactive as we can. And our friend Joe Daleen has a great question. How important is implementation time to go live? And I might ask the question to you guys a little bit differently. And I know the answer, by the way, so I'm cheating, but
for Joe, the answer is go both begin right now.
How, in that process where the lender and the vendor are in that early stage, right? They're setting expectations together. How important is it to set a realistic timeline and for go live, right? Or implementation, whatever you want to call it. I like to say go live. When is the rubber hitting the road, right? That's when I'm going to start realizing the benefit. And so how important is that up front? And then through that process, when is the right time when you to reevaluate if you don't think that go live date is going to be made? And then how does that start to impact the analysis on ROI? That's for all 3 of you to kind of take a shot at.
I'll take a pass at it. So I think yeah, having the right planning for time is critical. It's not necessarily duration of time, in my opinion. It's a combination of duration and what activities you're undertaking in that time window you're allocating yourself for the implementation thing. What are we going to try with? Are we trying to do in our checklist for success, in our paper, we talk about explore the potential for small pilots and quick wins. That's an implementation time activity. Kind of think about what is that one thing I'm going to try to see it actually the water is flowing through the pipes, so to speak. And what am I going to do in terms of iteration and evaluation? I'm going to rapidly test and learn. I'm going to deploy a new QC software. I'm going to have it reconcile my loan data set and my closing data set. And I'm going to focus on this thing first. I'm going to focus on asset data first and focus on expand that to cover something else. So there is a path in this implementation time for you to think about this small pilots and kind of iterative test and learn. And obviously your time duration truly depends on how much contingency you got. And hopefully you have contingency built in to how you thought about this. Right? Before the new system comes on live, how long can you actually run your business on an alternate system? And if you don't have that luxury, you're going to really compress the implementation time and then take some shortcuts that are going to come back and bite you down the road. So time is absolutely important. Planning for how long and what activities you're going to do in that how long to harden this new tech you're bringing in is super important. We recommend small pilots, rapid test and learn. Don't offboard the vendor the day after you think you go in pilot. Make sure that you got a strong relationship and some continuity of vendor service through the duration of that implementation. I know budgets are not always generous, and you can't necessarily hold on to resources you shouldn't. But through implementation time and through this iteration, it's absolutely critical to have that tight loop between the vendor, tech provider, and the customer. And I think, measure, iterate, I think is the right thing to do. It's not just the number of days or windows you put out there, weeks you put out there in your implementation plan, but what measured things you're doing to harden yourself with the tech. Valuable.
I love the way you answered that question. I actually heard the question in a different way. When I look at the question that was asked about what's the right timing and how does that look, I think about who's harmed. So PB mentioned that, and can you continue to be on the existing tech, or is it going to create a problem? But it's how are you communicating that to the stakeholders that are excited about this, what's going to be delivered, those that are going to be your proselytizers, right? Your early adopters to drive change management in the organization. And I've heard time and time again from technology users that we can't trust the timelines that are given to us by our tech team, or we can't trust the timelines given to us by a vendor. They're always late. They're always whatever. And I think that's on us when we're working in implementation to actually communicate back to everybody when there's a change. I think human nature says we want to show up and we want to deliver exactly as we said, and we don't necessarily want to admit our mistakes or say that we're going to have to deliver something late. But early communication, if something gets delayed, is key to continuing to drive change. And I don't think that if you set realistic expectations, like PB said, you deliver that to the stakeholders, and then as things change, you continuously communicate with authenticity and transparency, that the time itself doesn't matter. That's not to say it doesn't matter at all, but it matters less when you communicate and you can explain to people, to PB's point, is your thing, is it tight? Do you know what caused this? And then is it going to be realistic the next date that you set? Because you don't want to lose trust as part of that implementation process. So to me, that's the biggest key. Are you maintaining trust during whatever period it is with good communication?
And I love that Christy can use the word bastardize and proselytize on the same. This is why I love this woman, right? Just a quick note on implementation, because I think it's been covered really well. I would say it's probably almost always going to take a little longer than you want it to, or a little longer than you think it will. And again, transparency and communication has been talked about. The other thing that I'll say is, again, having been on both sides, implementation is probably one of the hardest, most thankless jobs inside of a software company, I would say. Many moons ago, I worked at a company where the software or the implementation team called themselves the dream killers, because they said, oh yeah, the sales team is off thinking campaign, and we're the ones that are going to like tell them, how it really is, so it's a really, really difficult job. I'll just say that. But what I would encourage is that as you go through the implementation of a software, one of the things I've observed happening is that when you don't allow a little bit of cushion, a little bit of buffer, because it's generally the task is going to people who pretty much already have a full-time job.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out, okay, how am I now going to do this? It is going to take a little more time. And what I commonly see happen is implementation is going to take X period of time. Lender gets behind because they've got 80 trillion things to do, and a fire pops up and whatever. They don't do their part. And what the executive team sees is, what's going on with this, what's wrong with this vendor, because they're,
Right.
we're behind, and they're hesitant to say, but it's your team who never turned in their data. Their team, so it can set up a really wonky dynamic from the get-go. And so I think laying that on the table just at the beginning and saying things are going to come up. We are a team. We're gonna, partner on this together. Things are going to come up for you, and we get it, but let's all be super transparent about this, because we are on your side. Nobody wants you to get through implementation faster than that vendor does, right? They want you to get through and be successful. But I think there needs to be some, sometimes some appreciation of both sides. The lenders got their hands full, the vendors doing the best they can to get you through as fast as possible. So it's a partnership, and both sides, again, having that appreciation for each other, that it's a tough time.
Yeah, this conversation would be totally different if we were having it 2 years ago, right? 2 years ago, the answer was, well, let's go hire a project manager and a couple more resources, and we'll bang this thing through. Well, that's not going to happen, Sue. You nailed it on the head.
Yeah.
Every company that's going through these implementation is using somebody that has a day job. And this implementation work that they're charged with, it becomes an extension of their day job. And the day job doesn't go away. The day job often is centered on what makes the company money, closing loans, right? So that's where I think everything ties back to transparency and communication and trust. I love that you weighed that in there, Christy. PB, you were going to say something.
I was going to make one of the, and then I think Christy and Sue will have a good perspective on this, because we back and forth quite a bit on this thread when we were writing the paper. There is going to be a gravitational pull during implementation from existing systems and existing processes that you're using today. There's something to be said for what's working today, and when you bring something new in to do things differently and better, and during that implementation, you're going to find a little bumps here and there as you go through, and then you got this gravity pull of the system of yesterday or the process of the day before trying to pull you back. And one of the things in this implementation timeline is also to have a dedicated effort to kind of figure out, what does it look like if I actually did not use that process of the day before on the tech of the week before? And am I retiring things that I'm supposed to retire? Am I replacing things that I'm supposed to replace? And that is a big part of this implementation thinking. Post-implementation revisiting of a retirement strategy actually is a missed opportunity in my mind, because you will not be informed of all the things that your new implementation is supposed to do unless you actually think about turning off the lights on the old one. And so in this process somewhere, and we tried to go through this a couple of times when we were revising the paper, and talk about this gravitational pull. And how do you really think about getting rid of what you ought to get rid of? Otherwise, you're not going to get the benefit of what you bought. And there was a kind of a quirky example and a case study in the back that talks about this idea of not retiring and not realizing the benefit of the new stuff. We'll touch on that if time permits, but I think that's an important angle, and I would like to see if Christy and Sue also have a point of view on it. Retirement and implementation, retirement of existing systems and implementation of new kind of have to go together in planning.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I'd add to that is it never fails to amuse me a tiny bit when people say, hey, this new technology doesn't work exactly like the old one did. It's like, exactly. Right? Again, you have to remember. So, well, good point made, PB.
Well, I love the way that the CEO of Trained puts it. And he says it's the illusion of choice, right? At some point, you kind of have to take away the choice to do it the old way.
Yeah.
You have to bring people along, right? You're not forcing, but you may be slowly taking away the ability to do it the old way, the ability to access the system. You are sunsetting it. And maybe even when we're trying to adopt new behaviors, you block the ability to do it the old way, right? You need people to try the new way. You need them to get used to what you're doing. So I love that term, the illusion of choice.
Yeah.
That really says you got to sunset the old way. You've got to really bring people along. And generally speaking, people don't like change. They want to do what's comfortable. They want to stay in their comfort zone. There's a reason there's 9,000 memes out there that talk about all the magic happening outside your comfort zone. So let's bring some magic to this tech process.
Yeah.
Let's take another question from our audience to keep them engaged. This is from Brent Emler, and I think this is a great question because we've seen a lot of new technology players come into the space in real estate finance, right? And so I'm really curious as to how you guys think about this question. How important is the vendor's mortgage domain expertise? And I think in my mind, there's a couple different themes or paths that this answer could go on, but what do you guys think there? Does it matter?
I'm going to say indispensable, right? Actually, that was part of the reason I took the CMB journey is because I felt like I was, well, I was okay with tech. You couldn't really make the most out of tech in terms of business results if you really didn't have an opportunity to sink your teeth deep into the business. And our industry manufactures and moves an asset of consequence. This is not a personal loan, 3 to 5K kind of average check size kind of product. This is not a auto loan product of 20, 30K asset risk carry. This is a product that's got 300, 350K kind of average carry on what we manufacture. So tech really has to have the knowledge of what are we using this for? What is the outcome? What job is this technology supposed to do? And the good news is almost all the fintechs that I run in with, even if they come with little industry expertise, they are able to acquire it rapidly, either by investing in self-learning or bring on experts in the industry to be part of those teams. We do need really novel, cutting-edge thinking to come from the outside. I actually value that quite a bit. We want to see tech vendors who have solved problems in auto or in commercial lending or in other places, even media, to come in and bring some new energy and new ideas. But to safely manufacture an asset and really deliver business result, expertise is valuable because you're not going to be able to engineer the right workflows if you did not know who you're supporting and why you need to support them for.
Anybody else want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I have an opinion. I actually think it's critical, but it can be learned. And so I love the fact that, PV is wearing his CMB, pin, right? Because I do think that we would miss out if we didn't embrace people into our technology companies that come from all kinds of amazing experiences outside of our world. Let's just all have a moment of, in the circle of trust here, and that we haven't been in the mortgage industry exactly been in the leading edge of technology advancement. We were behind, and for a lot of good reasons, but we were behind. And I think we're catching up now, and I think that's good. However, I do think it is critical that there are at least key stakeholders in the technology company that absolutely understand the business, because I think tech providers sometimes they kind of fail to appreciate the complexities of a lender's business and all of the in-flight mechanisms that, no, you can't touch that because then these 3 things are going to do that. And so, so you do need to have key people in the business that do have that understanding. But I would certainly pull short of saying that, we should be insular to the mortgage industry, because I think there's so much wisdom that can gained by looking to other industries and how they've used change management, how they approached adoption, how have they, been better with integrations, how, there's a lot of things we can learn there.
Totally agree with that. I think the other thing that we have to look at is, I would love to solve the problems the way that people outside the industry suggest that we do. Right? They're not constrained from an idea perspective of what regulation this is going to run afoul of, or what generally expected operating principle this is going to do. And so they bring to this point, they bring these great ideas, but if that's all you have, you're coming to market with something that's not going to work at all. And so however you gain the knowledge, if you go through the CMB journey and get your pen, or if you have a board of advisors that is really steeped in the knowledge, whatever it is, you've got to have that balance of new and old. And I think that's the key to delivering something that's impactful and powerful. And I think this is a great segue. I know we may not have enough time to talk about it, but PB and Brian and I think 80 of our friends spent some time with the FHFA looking at a tech sprint and bringing together people that are both in the industry, outside the industry, lenders, technologists, developers, different folks, to have this conversation about how do we drive the improvements that consumers are expecting and that lenders have to have in order to survive in the margin environment that we're in.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because we are getting towards the top of the hour. So we've got about 10 minutes or so left. One thing I would add to the mortgage expertise, the importance of inside of tech, I kind of think of it on a continuum. And if the continuum is on one end, where we're talking about the high nature of regulation in our industry, loan guidelines and document, that have to be perfect, boom, 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 boom. That's one end of the continuum. And the other end maybe doesn't touch the loan manufacturing process. I think as you get closer to the one end of the spectrum where regulation becomes more central, I do think having subject matter expertise for mortgage specifically is more important. But I also agree it doesn't have to be in the DNA of the tech provider, as long as they can solve for bringing those resources to the table in the form of advisors or consultants and things of that sort. I think it's a great question, and probably a topic for an episode all by itself. But yeah, Christy, you brought up the FHFA Velocity Tech Sprint 2023, and I love that they put 2023 in the title, because it presumes that there'll be a 2024 and a 2025. Kudos to Jason Cave and his team at FHFA for having the foresight and the gumption to pull together this topic and this group of industry experts. Most of them were experts because I was there, so you can't just blanketly say expert. The other side of it is, as I was in the room for the week and observing who was there based on company and the people themselves, I think all the participants deserve a virtual round of applause for taking time from their professional and personal schedules to invest in our industry, because that's what it was about. This was where companies that were competitors or our competitors came together to have conversations around solving for some of the challenges that our industry still faces. And for those that weren't there and haven't kind of seen some of the output, the FHFA brought these groups of folks in to solve for some problems around adoption of some of the different digital solutions, to address some of the lack of trust in the process, both from a consumer perspective as well as a lender perspective. And then the teams kind of worked for 3 full days on very specific problem statements and use cases, and then presented their proposals at the end of the week to an esteemed panel of judges. And what was very cool was, by and large, the theming that came out of the work groups was pretty tight. It was pretty, in a range in terms of what the team saw as the big problems, and even how they thought about solving for those problems. And so I thought maybe we just spend a few minutes kind of getting, Christy and PB, your feedback from being in the room, and Sue, your feedback from observing from your seat, and kind of, also your perspective within Strathmore on kind of these types of think tanks, and can they be useful and successful for our business. So Christy, your thoughts on the week and some of your takeaways.
I think that the first thing that FHFA did right was, they sent out an RFI around this and said, hey, what do you think about technology in our space? They got a lot of input and insights, and kudos to Jason and his team, because they really did what I would call a listening tour, going out and talking to people from every perspective before they put this thing together and said, here's the way we want to approach this. They got a lot of input from people who actually know and understand the business. Then they pulled together a really amazing group of people, and they were very proactive in thinking about the expertise that they needed in the room. So this was a room full of, to your point, Brian, 8 players who understand the business from stem to stern, along with people who are ancillary in terms of supporting it. You can't do the tech without this, without that person. And they had all of that in the room, and then said, hey, take a day and figure out how we can best solve these problems. I thought it was fascinating, the span and the creativity of everybody addressing the same problem. People came with some very different ideas. There were definitely some themes, but it was amazing to see that type of collaboration and the type of work product that was delivered within the confines of what we had to do. And I was lucky. PB was my leader.
I was lucky. I echo what Christy said. What I took away was the diversity and depth. I think Christy called it span, but how might data and digitization help was kind of the theme, right? How might data and digitization, how might it help? You can fill in a lot of things on the help side. It feel better consumer experience, better compliance, lower cost, all those kinds of good things. And I thought the diversity of thought in the room was incredible. And the depth with which in 3 days, people were able to kind of come up with solutions, and the creativity, like how Christy mentioned, was incredible. I think there were applications of data and digitization as answers for everything from supply, like solving inventory kind of issues, through affordability, consumer experience, compliance, risk, post-purchase, and also the investor side of things. So the ideas and the application of data and tech very broadly embraced in the industry across all aspects of this supply chain of how the asset was made, and the depth with which the teams went into. I mean, folks invested heavily in looking at data and different kinds of statistics, and where can you look for these opportunities that have data and digitization make an impact on the underserved borrower segment, make an impact on risk, make an impact on responsible lending. I thought it was incredible. There was definitely an undercurrent of AI. I think there was, if you saw it on the demos or so, there were maybe 1 or 2 even had like a chat GPT driven kind of interaction thing in there, meaning the emerging tech is also being considered as a potential set of solutions here for this kind of problem space. I'm like you, BV, I'm looking forward to a 2024 or something else to follow up, because I think FHFA did a really nice job of bringing a bunch of people together to kind of brainstorm and come up with some ideas and what can we do to be better as an industry.
Last comments I'll make on that. I was not in attendance, but I remember being at MBA Tech where this, this was talked about, that this was going to be happening, and certainly the right people were in the room, as evidenced by this call. But I think everybody kind of has this knowledge and feeling of something needs to work differently, because there's so much complexity, and that is part of what's driving the cost issue that is on everybody's minds all of the time. But nobody can solve it in isolation. It's not right. Like one tech provider or even one segment can say, well, we're going to do this. It doesn't work that way. Everybody has to be working in concert. And so my hope for this is that that's what starts to come out of this, is where we're able as an industry to say, okay, let's all work together. We all have to do something a little different, but maybe we can start to, make some of the changes that would, as I said, reduce some of the complexity, lower some of the cost, and have a meaningful change, for the industry, but most importantly, in turn, for the consumers that we serve.
That was that was what was most refreshing to me, was based on that statement, Sue. What I saw, and I got to see this happening, was that you had companies and people that were competitors or now are competitors, and then you had people up and down the distribution chain, right? If you think about a loan that starts with a loan officer, it has to ultimately get to an end investor and a servicer. You had all these different participants kind of weighing in. Do I think we're going to solve this problem anytime soon? Probably not. But the fact that we had this opportunity to have the conversation and start to socialize that it's more than just my problem inside of my company. It's a widespread industry thing. I do feel hopeful that we'll over time start to solve for this. So one of the things that I do as a podcast host is try to be prompt. And I know we're going to lose a lot of audience at the top of the hour for their next meeting, right? And probably some of us that have to jump. But let's do this. Let's just go around real quick, and any parting thoughts that you'd like to share that we didn't get to today. And I'll start with Sue.
Yeah, my parting thought would be, or my action item that I would ask all of you to do is, if your lender, reach out to your technology partners, schedule an hour and say, I've probably missed some stuff that you've come up with over the last couple of years because we were busy with a lot of other stuff. Can we just do a refresh on features, functionality? What did you come up with in maybe 2021 that I totally missed because I was too busy? But just do a regroup and refresh and sync up with your technology partners on all the good stuff that they have that you might have missed during the fray.
So Sue, that is such great advice, because how often do we go seek a new solution, and most times the solution's already with one of your existing partners. You just didn't know it, and shame on the partner for not making you aware. That's a great piece of advice right there. PB, I'm doing my Brady Bunch around the box circle. So PB,
look, technology is indispensable for our industry. We will not be able to do what we are doing today without tech. And in implementation of tech, realizing positive ROI on tech is not easy. And what I would say is if you're an MBA member, if you're a MISMO member, if you're a CMB Society member, there are resources out there that can help you. There are individuals out there you can network with and tap into their expertise and their experiences. If you ran into an issue with a particular tech or a vendor, more than likely somebody else as well. And my experience, at least in the last 2.5 years or so since I've been out of the GSE, is this is an industry where people do help each other and they share. And to the extent you can. I mean, there is always some contractual and other boundaries that you have, but by and large, you have resources out there that talk about different techniques and traps with ROI. There are resources out there that can help you understand what interoperability of technology means, what standardization of data could mean for you. So there is a large body of data and documents and help out there for you to tap into. And any one of us on this call would be happy to field a question or follow up from anyone in the audience to help you in your own journeys with tech.
Thanks, PB. Christy, bring us home.
All right, last word. There are no sacred cows. We're at a time in the industry where you've really got to evaluate everything and look at how tech can help you. Look at things that you haven't looked at before, and look for the new vendors that are out there, right? Sue talked about your existing vendor and what stack they offer. Once you go through and you say, hey, there's no sacred cows in my operation, from beginning to end, and you say, I think I could improve this, talk to both your current vendors and look at what new vendors are out there, because there's a lot of people that have come into this space because they saw what happened during COVID. And with that volume, they either experienced something and they're coming out with new solutions. So to PB's point, right, tying it all together, you need to reach out to one of us, your friends at the CMB Society, your friends at MBA, whoever your friends are, this is the time to use your phone a friend see what things they're implementing and how it can improve your processes, workflows, and get you to the place where you want to be so that you are ready to compete as the market continues to improve.
Awesome. Well, look at you guys are experts in your space. Collectively, your knowledge is so valuable. Thank you so much for doing the work on the paper and then coming on and sharing a little bit more detail and your expertise. It's always great to be with each of you. I know I learned a lot here. I know our audience did as well. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks everybody for tuning in. This will also be streaming on your favorite podcast platform on the FinTech Fridays podcast. So we'll get that published out there. So thanks again, Sue, Christy, and PB. And thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Brian, thank you for having us and for hosting us.
Right on.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, you guys killed it.